Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Welcome back, everyone, for another bonus live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast here at ASU+GSV in beautiful San Diego. So we are here with David McCool from Muzzy Lane, and we are going to be talking more about their work. And, it's always a treat for me to get kind of out of my bubble, talking more about teaching and learning, where, my background's a lot of more kind of extracurricular kind of stuff, in student engagement. But, just always appreciate the opportunity to explore areas that are a little, out of my comfort zone. So, David, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and also just explain a little bit about the work that your organization does.
Sure, thanks. So Dave McCool, CEO of Muzzy Lane. We provide a platform to higher ed publishers and universities that allow them to build their own role play assessments and deliver them through their learning management system as part of their courses.
And what brought you to leading this organization? What's your origin story?
So my background was networking telecom startups before this. Had an idea to bring history gaming into education. That's where we started. Those were the first products we did as a company. And I think as we learned the market, we realized kind of what the use cases were, where things would fit, and kind of moved into providing tools to let instructional designers and other curriculum developers build their own interactive experiences in kind of the game and simulation format.
And I feel like, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like those really peaked in the 90s or maybe early 2000s. That was I always was playing those sort of games. And also as a history major now, I'm sure maybe that either helped me to nurture my love of history, but even just also I love video games and then I love education. And so in hindsight, I'm of course I clicked with those things and, those are available. But I think it is that idea of bringing kind of imagination, creativity to sort of learning experiences, the idea of just we've had a couple of conversations so far, bringing AI and kind of teaching and learning and academic integrity, just all these kind of things. It's I think this is just an interesting moment that it is kind of, AI is being a catalyst for people to kind of, just kind of bring in a new era of kind of thinking around what can, teaching and learning and how do we assess that learning, I don't know, just kind of a rejuvenation, I guess, as a naive outsider looking in. So I guess kind of what is your perspective on that, I guess, just as we're kind of, learning more about you, your background and the work that you do, but kind of your perspective on this moment and how it's kind of being shaped as sort of a new opportunity to kind of rethink all that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to that. So there were a couple of waves of sort of serious games or, games for learning. There was the Oregon Trail era. Then after we started kind of 2010s, the serious games movement, I think the challenges were always, they were coming from outside education, formal education. And I think as online education has matured, the way to do that has become more clear. And it's not a standalone game that you start, you play, you finish, maybe for 10 hours. Building game-like experiences into the online learning experience. And so that's been the journey we've been on for the last 10 years. We did some Gates Foundation research about 10 years ago, which kind of brought that into clarity. But then I think the last part of what you said is most important and relevant for now is AI. Is how is AI changing that? And, at its extreme, AI could just replace all pre-built content. Every learner's experience could be generated on the fly in a personalized fashion. We're not really there yet as a education industry. Maybe we never will be. But what AI is doing is it's making it a lot easier to build high-quality interactive learning experiences in the game and simulation format for learning and for assessment, and enhance those experiences selectively with AI features, voice features, make them more engaging, draw the learner into this experience where you're trying to either teach them something, let them practice something, or measure how well they can do something.
Yeah, and that's great. And definitely excited to just talk more about that. But before we get too far, just here at this event, this is kind of a seminal, ed tech event and everything. We're talking you've been coming for several years. For this year in particular, what brings you to the event? How are you showing up? What are you kind of looking forward to? And we're also, winding down day one. Any reflections on the event so far?
Yeah, I think the last couple of years coming here, kind of the similar profile, set up, most of my time is meetings set up in advance. I think that's sort of been increasingly the case over the years here as it's gotten bigger. 3 categories of people. I want to meet with prospects. I want to meet with potential universities who are looking to bring this kind of learning and assessment into their programs. Meet with potential partners. So, all the publishers are here. The platform providers like, say, Coursera and others are here. And then increasingly meeting with investors and money people who fund the work in this space. So day one was great. It's funny, this year I'm meeting mostly with people I've met before, at least once, so It's easier to find them. A lot of follow-up, a lot of kind of relationship building.
Yeah. It's a shared sentiment because I think it is like, again, with it being kind of a seminal event, like most likely like everybody's here, maybe popping in, whether they're like, just kind of in town or whatever else, but that idea that like it is an opportunity to kind of sustain a lot of relationships or deepen them or whatever, and certainly, start new ones as well, but just that idea like this is such an important kind of tentpole, for the kind of whole education technology kind of community, K through 12 and higher ed. But yeah, and I think, kind of harkening back to what we were talking about before, your work and kind of, the way that AI is kind of elevating, the sort of like, role play and, these sort of, methods to help students learn and kind of assess their learning and stuff. Like, it is an idea. Like, I've always been kind of intrigued and fascinated and just really impressed by the things that have existed several years ago. So like, I guess this just popped in my mind, but I guess how have you seen, I guess, to draw that contrast more prior to kind of the advent of all the things that are kind of happening right now? What was it like before, and how is it getting better? I guess that's kind of the core of what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so we play primarily not just in online learning, but in the online components of learning, which is increasingly everybody has an online component to learning. And one of the things that's been true ever since online learning has been big is there's not necessarily an instructor around at the time that that's happening. So any sort of learning, feedback, assessment has to be automated, has to be delivered by the program itself. And that's always been a limitation on the kinds of learning you could do, the kinds of assessment you could do. There have been like little inroads of games and sims into that. People will build, off-the-shelf learning games, learning simulations. Marketing and business is a big space for that. And so people would use them, but they didn't quite fit. They weren't exactly what they were looking for. So I think what's changed in the last few years, and AI has been a big part of this, is the ability for people building those programs to bring those kinds of techniques in a way that's completely customized to their use case. In role play, where we really focus it's a big deal. Like storytelling is a huge part of learning. Historically, over time, we moved away from that in modern learning to a lot of degree, and especially in online learning. But bringing that back in, there was an MIT conference a while back where one of the takeaways was novelty plus emotion equals learning. Like we need to draw you in something novel, something interesting, get you engaged, and then evoke a response from you and get you caring about the outcome. And then you really focus, then you build those neural pathways, and things stick. So that's what we're trying to do, and AI has really helped that.
Clarifying kind of follow up on that, because then I kind of framed a question which I'm trying to kind of like fine tune of just sort of like, what are the opportunities AI is presenting in teaching and learning? I'm sure there are many, but like kind of getting it really specific into this context and everything. Like, because I think part of it would be, like you said, like doing any sort of like simulation role play would be very hard in online education. There have been inroads made there, prior to kind of the ubiquity of AI platforms and kind of functionality and everything. But I guess my thought would be it's the case now, or that is sort of like something on the kind of on the horizon, is that AI could help like simulations or role play like be more dynamic. If like you're playing off of some sort of like avatar or whatever else, it perhaps could be more dynamic than it's like, well, we kind of built the software and it was what it was. Because like there'd be like kind of a limitation of like, yeah, once you kind of figure it out, you can kind of like, just beat it, or whatever. So like, is that kind of something, the idea that like whatever was before can now be augmented to be a little bit more dynamic to do those sort of like simulative?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a balancing act that we're trying to strike with our customers, because like I said, there are AI tutor products out there now which will create on-the-fly role-play scenarios and let you run through those as a learner. It's a little more challenging to connect that into a curriculum and the overall goals of a curriculum. And if you're credentialing or you're part of a degree program, make sure you're hitting the points you need to hit. But I think short of that, you can use AI to bring in much more dynamic interactions in an overall structured activity. So I need a formative assessment. It's a Master's of Health Administration. Here are the 3 skills we're working on that I need to figure out where my learners are. They need to get some practice on those skills. So we can stay with that structure, but inside that, use AI to create much more dynamic interactions in the role play. So your learner has more agency. They're showing more cognitive sort of processing, things like open responses to questions, not all multiple choice or other structured response type things. So where you're building the response, not selecting the response, are big improvements.
And I guess even like, because it could be the idea of maybe there was like a spectrum before where like, we a company builds this sort of like, simulative learning thing, and some are going to make it more or less complex, like even just the ability to like do it more efficiently. The idea of like, yeah, we can build these things to be as good or better, even quicker, versus like, oh, it'd be so laborious to be, all these sort of like decision branching of like, if this, then that. And yeah, even then it's like, well, we can only limit it to be like, yeah, it has to be multiple choice or, whatever. So like, yeah, just like kind of dynamicism in like many senses, I guess, is sort of just like something that kind of excites me, I guess, because like, again, all of this is like kind of harkening back to like gaming for me and all that. Like there's such enjoyable experiences, but also like, I was just saying this to somebody the other day where like, I was playing a lot of like role-playing games, like a Final Fantasy or something, where it was all just text-based. You had to read all of it. You had to kind of try to understand what's going on, so it's that idea of like even things that aren't explicitly, made to be kind of, these like learning tools can have that. So that is the idea of like the more intentionality, the more sort of strategic thought that goes into it, and kind of just purpose-driven and, maybe even just really tailor-made kind of things that now can, again, be done more effectively, more efficiently, just in terms of the development of them, but also just kind of the, I don't know, the assessment, of like the learning or the assessment of kind of things like that. So, because that's what I wanted to kind of like go to next, was the idea of like in this moment, one chunk that I've kind of observed that like AI is sort of forcing a conversation on is like, how do we assess learning? Because obviously like there's kind of this existential crisis of like, well, you submit a paper, somebody just could use AI to write all of it. And how do we do we kind of scrap all that kind of stuff and try to go a different route, or do we use AI to try to better, evaluate, assignments or whatever else? So all that to be said, I'll put it kind of more open-ended to you. What are kind of the conversations that you've been having with people on that topic of like, how do we properly assess learning within the higher ed context?
I think there's two parts of that. One's AI related, one's not. Even before AI, we were struggling, especially in online learning assessment, on how to assess what people can do versus what they know. Because content assessment takes you so far, but as we move towards really trying to make sure people are graduating or coming out of academic programs able to do the things that we say they can do. And that's a challenging thing to do in a multiple choice test, for example. So you're generally testing recall. So that existed before, and so things like games and simulations were very much targeted at addressing that, but it was challenging. So AI's done two things, kind of funny, two contradictory things. It's made keeping assessments valid and authentic a lot harder. To your point about papers, that's what we always heard before. It's like, well, it's too challenging to build a simulation for you to be a marketing manager. I'll have you write a paper about being a marketing manager, and I'll evaluate your thought process and your ideas. Well, if AI can write that paper, can I still do that? I'm not really sure. But at the same time, it's made it harder to know that something is valid. It's making it easier to create more complex, more outcomes-oriented assessments, which are a little harder. They're not, we call it AI resilient. It's not AI proof. There's nothing that's really AI proof anymore. But there's a lot more work that goes into breaking a game or a simulation with AI than, say, a multiple choice test or a paper assignment.
Yeah, so that's what I think the conversation folks are following along. Like I kind of position that idea of like the moment we're in, does it require us to like take things away or add more in, because that'd be the idea of like, okay, well then we have to scrap papers that people submit into the learning management system. We got to go to Blue Books or something, like you're kind of taking some of the way and then maybe, adding in like an analog or whatever. Or it's the idea of like, okay, keep everything the same, but then we got to have like more hoops or something to jump through to kind of, verify and validate and, whatever. Again, that I kind of what I was sort of starting on, in our conversation, that idea that like there is maybe kind of a, renewed energy or kind of a renaissance around, the opportunity to get kind of more creative and imaginative around like, kind of simulations and role play and those sort of things. Cause like you said, it's like they've stood the test of time, that's been a tool used for a long time. And the idea of kind of getting to it more effectively and efficiently or, making it more dynamic or whatever else, I think, like that can kind of change the conversation.
Yeah, I think to go to your example of Final Fantasy, right? I mean, we were in the games industry before this. People went to spend huge amounts of money to build the engines behind those kinds of games to make those characters that you interacted with in role-playing games feel realistic, feel authentic, feel interesting. You now can get a Gen AI engine for free in some cases, plug it into your product. You have all of that at your disposal today. So I think for me, part of the challenge, part of the opportunity is, okay, you now have all that power at your hands. Now, what are you going to do with it, and how do you build effective educational experiences using that?
Yeah, and I think I'm just like recognizing too, because one, this is sort of like engaging in a different part of my brain, I guess, with like teaching and learning and thinking back to like all these like educational games, different things or whatever else. But like getting towards the end of this day and just a lot of ideas swirling, whatever. But I think this is just like, again, getting to a more really specific, tangible kind of application of all this, or like really seeing kind of the direct impacts where like, and I was saying to somebody else where like, in the early days of kind of the existential crisis of like AI in higher education, it was all this sort of pontificating about like, what does it mean? What's going to happen? Whatever. But like now we're seeing like really compelling, impactful, positive use cases around people are, using it for content development, who are using it for, all sorts of things. Yeah. So it's just really exciting for me to see. And then again, just it being kind of a little bit out of my wheelhouse of like teaching and learning, but it's just like, obviously that is like really the main part of like the students like enrolling to take the classes and learn things and, get their credential, as much as sort of the, extracurricular kind of stuff. But yeah. So I guess as sort of like a final, as we're leading into the final question, the final question would be kind of like advice and everything. But what do you kind of see on the horizon, I guess? Because I guess you're just really kind of awash in this kind of segment of teaching and learning and content development and, implementation and everything. Like, what are you seeing maybe with like conversations here, sessions or, whatever else?
I think there's a subtext of, you mentioned it before, what things is AI obsoleting and what things is AI enabling? And I think everyone's still trying to figure that out. And I think we probably still all wake up every once in a while and go, wait a minute, this is either going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to me or it's going to put me out of business, right? It's going to mean nothing I do matters anymore. And I think the thing that I think is my opinion and the thing that people should think about is we still need structure. We still have student interaction, student motivation, student engagement to address. AI on its own is not going to do all the things we need to do there. So I think the question is going to be, what's the balancing act between how much can you bring that power that AI brings to you and marry it to the structure you need to meet the learning goals that your learners have or whatever they're going to go on to do later, the credentials maybe they need to earn, the skills they need to demonstrate to employers, the habits of mind they need to develop. We're constantly thinking about how can we use AI to get you to think more, not less. We know that mental atrophy is a big problem with certain ways that AI can be deployed. I think those are the things that I hear people grappling with.
Yeah, like you said, I think just trying to find the ways that, because yeah, even if, you're working with somebody who's, leveraging these kind of simulation and, role play kind of things, obviously like to get there, you should be, instructing and getting them kind of comfortable and ready and prepared to then kind of practice. So I think it's that idea too, where it's like, well, we're not saying, oh, this is just going to be like, oh, we're just going to be taught by this, this tool or this platform. And the teacher, like, like, oh, it's like irrelevant. It's like, no, there's just going to be those opportunities to augment, perhaps the instruction that is still being facilitated by a human. And then the human is still going to kind of review how the simulation went and whatever. Oh, see, this is like kind of getting to be an overused term, but like the human in loop kind of thing,
Yeah,
like,
right.
But
yeah, exactly.
So I think it's just like, and I guess it's refreshing and, maybe it bears repeating, I guess, that sort of, turn of phrase. But, because, yeah, I think it's just like, for me, it's always the like more efficient, more effective, and the idea that like what's old is new again, maybe, some of the stuff, it's just kind of coming back and having that much more of an impact than maybe it had in years past. But with all that being said, being mindful of time and with the question we're asking everybody, advice that we'd give to other higher ed leaders that are navigating this moment.
Be very purposeful about AI and how you use it, but don't have illusions, I guess. AI can seem perfect sometimes. We all know it's not perfect. And you still see people all the time pointing out things that they've tried to use AI for where it confidently told them the wrong answer. So be mindful of that. Don't be defeatist about, oh, what's the point of doing anything that AI could do? Because there is still reason to do that. There's still a reason to build curriculum. There's still a reason to build assessments. There's still a reason to credential our students, help them, give them the practice and the opportunity to build the skills they need. It's about skill building. And AI alone really is not a great skill builder for students. And I guess that's one thing I would fall back on. And then I think for this conference itself, I had a colleague who once said, half of life is showing up. And I think that's how I think of this conference. Everyone's here, so show up. I don't even know the sessions. I haven't been to a lot of sessions in the last few years, but relationship building with the people that are important to you professionally in your life or even personally, I think that's reasonable enough to be here.
Yeah, because I think that's the idea of like, you would hope folks that come here, they do. Like, there's a lot of people here and there's a lot of things going on. So like, there's a lot of people in sessions, a lot of people just like hanging out, networking or, whatever else. But yeah, like wherever you are, hopefully you're finding those opportunities to, get to where you want to go to learn and grow about, AI and not have it be the boogeyman, not have it be the sort of like infallible, kind of cure to all our, ailments or whatever. It's like, you do have to be kind of, scrutinizing, thoughtful, intentional, and, keeping in the loop with it in terms of like kind of evaluating it. But yeah, I think just wherever you are, to me, like, being in spaces like this, like there are other people on the journey also that want to get these things demoed want maybe more one-on-one time, or are going to do the more like, kind of group sessions and things that are like being provided at places like this. So then it's like, it's all humans doing that. They're all showing off the things, like it's
Exactly.
I don't know. But I think, this is a really great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I just appreciate you for kind of the work that you're doing, in this space, teaching and learning and everything. Ways to connect with you and Muzzy Lane in the episode description. But just thanks for getting a little bit of your time at the event.
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.